Mark here for Mark 2.0. Gordon, take it away.
Hey, I'm thrilled right now to be inviting on a gentleman I used to work with in a different lifetime, 25, almost 30 years ago. He and I worked in the marketing and database management industry. And he learned his lesson well. He learned his marketing well because after leaving the company, he was just a young guy. He went back to school, got his PhD in supply chain logistics. And now, as you can see, he's with Dalhousie University. He is the Doctor of Agri-Food Analytics, the lab at Dalhousie, and he has branded himself as the food professor. I give you Monsieur Sylvain Charlebois, coming to us from Tampa Bay. Welcome to the podcast, Sylvain.
Thank you, Gord. Thank you, Mark. And it's a pleasure to join you guys. When I got Gord's note, I thought it was the ghost of Christmas past connecting with me all of a sudden, and looked at his picture. First time I saw him without a mustache, if you remember, and less hair. Yes, I didn't want to go there, but you're rubbing your head, so let's go there. And I connected both the name and the face, and yeah, so it was great. And inviting me to your podcast was a pleasure.
Uh, the thing I want to now, what's interesting is you've gone into academia, but when I knew you, when I first knew you, you were 18, 19 years of age, basically working as almost like a young intern for a marketing company.
That's right.
And you learned your marketing lessons well. That's my little guy who loves to sneak around. Adrian, I asked you to get in your room. The joys of a home-based podcast. But I wanted to ask you, being in marketing, a lot of it is about branding. You're told you, the individual, are a brand, and you've done that. You've branded yourself as Canada's food doctor, and now you're appearing on CTV, Global, CBC as an expert. And I think that branding is massive. How did you come up with the food doctor?
Well, I mean, the secret is that I didn't. What's so the one thing I learned quickly because I earned my living in the Rock. Since you lived in Quebec City, you probably know what the Rock is. The rest of Canada, you have to live in English, but you carry. I had to carry a French name that nobody was able to pronounce. And so, as my academic career was getting started, I was starting to get invited to speak to different groups all across the country. And I remember about 20 years ago in Calgary, I was invited and I was relatively unknown at the time. They invited me over because they thought that the research I was doing is cool. I was actually in Saskatchewan at the time, and when I ended up in Calgary, the MC there couldn't pronounce my name. How do you pronounce your name? How do you, and then he just you could tell he was struggling. And then he looked at me, he looked at my resume, and you know what? Why don't I call you the food professor? And and it stuck. I mean, so people called me the food professor. There was there was probably about 500 people in the room, high hitters in the ag industry, and then an editor in the room. An editor was in the room from Canadian Grocer magazine. And after my talk, she really enjoyed my talk, came over and said, "Why don't you write a column for us?" I said, "Sure, no problem." And do you have a title for your column? And I said, "No, not really." "Well, why don't we call it the food professor?" So it kind of built that way, and frankly, after a while I embraced it because I felt people may not remember my name, but will remember uh, the food professor. And frankly, the food professor really captures what I do, really, because I cover both ends of the food continuum from farm to fork. I look at consumers, I look at processing, I look at farming, I look at everything. So it's hard for me to say I'm an economist in this or that. I'm just a food prof. That's it.
Wonderful. And
Yeah.
you're getting so much play right now because obviously this is a big topic for conversation everywhere. Is we're looking at significant inflation. We're looking at shortages in some cases. When people are going shopping now, they're noticing holes in the grocery shelves. Nothing catastrophic, but it is being noticed. Where are we heading? I've been listening to you speak on major network news programs, and you're predicting in tandem with, I believe, the UN, that the world is going to be facing significant food shortages. Western developed countries like Canada, that our problem won't be so much access as it will be cost.
That's right.
So, what are you seeing on the world stage, and what can we expect specifically here in Canada?
Well, I think, I mean, both the US and Canada, we're in a bit of a bubble, really. We're in a food security bubble. We can buy our way out of a food insecurity problem. Let's face it. I mean, traders are probably right now hoarding. They're buying everything they can for the fall. Uh, Big companies like Nestle, Mondelez, they're all buying right now for the fall. They'll be fine. They'll be fine. But we're going to be in the deficit for sure because of what's going on with Ukraine. We started the year with very low inventories for many grains like wheat, canola. It wasn't a good start, and the war by President Putin just happened at the worst time possible, I would think, and he probably knew that. Because of the COVID hangover affecting supply chains, that made things even worse. So you're seeing the perfect playbook to a global food security crisis unfolding before our eyes. So let's start climate. You had climate change, droughts, floodings in Germany, droughts in Russia, Canada, the US. And then you had the pandemic. The pandemic really just weakened the entire system altogether, kept people sick, lots of waste, lots of inefficiencies, moving anything on water, on land costs more. It just basically, and it's still not in sync. The entire world economy is still not in sync right now. We're still struggling. You saw the number of boats in Shanghai. I mean, it's just incredible. So we got the pandemic, the war. The war started in February. That created a new cycle, an inflation cycle, and we're in the middle of that one right now. We saw it in the numbers today from StatsCan, and finally, and this is really starting right now. It's I would say nationalistic hoarding by countries, and you saw that with Indonesia and palm oil a few weeks ago because we're expecting shortages for vegetable oil, and just yesterday with India and wheat. So you're seeing panic, institutionalized panic, which will get countries to think about their own before anybody else, and that will actually only make things worse. So when the FAO and the World Bank says to the world, you know what, 100 million more people will suffer from hunger or even will experience famine, I believe it.
Well, going back to the beginning of the pandemic, I recall there being predictions coming out of the UN stating that within a year, they were saying by the end of 2020, they were expecting, due to constraints on supply chains, they were expecting 100 plus million people to be suffering from food insecurity before the war in Ukraine, before this craziness we're seeing with the price of oil and gas. And it was already predicted. And now we have the war in Ukraine. We have, what is I saw you tweet within the last week or so, something to the effect of how the budget that was just tabled within the last 2-3 weeks federally in Canada, how there was nothing given to Canadian farmers, how they need fuel subsidies, fuel relief, access to cheaper energy,
Yep.
and that there was nothing for them. How is the energy market impacting the Canadian food? How is it impacting Canadian food producers?
Oh, well, it's impacting everyone and everything really across the food chain. But yeah, to your comment about the budget, and I forgot you're on Twitter, so you probably see all my stuff every day. The budget itself, tabled by Ottawa a few weeks ago, just the underlying intent was to actually make agriculture greener, which is fine. I mean, that's what the Trudeau government wants to do. But right now, we really need a more efficient agriculture. And what I mean by that is, you know, we need to rethink the carbon tax, how it's impacting farmers, for example. Access to affordable fertilizers, which is actually not something that we're seeing right now. It's very expensive to buy fertilizers to increase yields. Helping them uh, grow their farms in terms of land use. Land use in Canada is shrinking, by the way. Since 2016, we're actually using 1.1% less farmland. So there's some problems there that we need to think about. And of course, your example of energy is very critical also for farmers. It, this year, I mean, prices are so attractive. Farmers will see. They'll put something in the ground because they'll make good money. Farmers will make very good money this year. However, I think the world, all eyes are on Canada and the United States to produce more. The Biden administration is actually presenting a $500 million package to support farmers to grow more of the crops we need this year, despite a very short-sighted decision that he made a few weeks ago, extending the ethanol mandate. The food to fuel debate came back, and of course Americans, and Mark would know this, Americans are obsessed with gasoline prices, and so to get votes and support for the midterm elections, he wanted to make sure that gas prices would drop as a result, but they didn't. That's the thing, they didn't. It will continue to increase, and so we're sacrificing a lot of land that was supposed to be dedicated for food, for fuel, for no
ethanol.
reason. And so there's a lot of things that makes me think that North America is in a bubble, and I actually don't believe that Americans and Canadians are fully aware of what's actually going on around the world right now.
We tend to be, North Americans in general tend to be very inward looking. And
I would say so. We've never been home of a huge battlefields, as you know, Gord. I know you're great with history. You're better than I am when it comes to history, to be honest. But I'd say really, and because you were in the military, you probably read a lot about wars and things like that. We never really saw uh, like huge famines and destruction as a result of war in North America, not like a Europe or other places. And so that's why North America will remain in this bubble, and to get some support politically is very difficult. But like I said, I mean, Canada, I think, lacks ambition. I said that to the parliamentary committee on Monday in Ottawa. I said we need to do more. The world is expecting more, and frankly, we can create a stronger, richer ag economy in Canada by supporting and delivering more goods to the world.
well, I'm going to go a little bit off track here, and I'm going to delve out of your area of specific expertise. But I'm sure you're familiar with the site worldmeters.com.
Yep.
It's used by all manner of different industries. And according to worldmeters.com, if their information is accurate, the world's population grows by about 200,000 each and every day, 73 million people per year being added net growth. That's after deaths subtracted from births. So we're adding a country larger than the size of Great Britain every year. So the question I have is, how do we feed? We've got 7.9 billion plus people on this planet now. How do we feed 8? How do we feed 9?
Well, with proper technologies, first of all, we're producing, I don't know if you knew this, Gord, but right now we're producing enough food to feed about 10 billion people on Earth.
Okay.
It's the waste. Waste is the problem, and distribution is another problem.
Okay.
And so if we fix both problems, I'm actually not that worried because based on estimations, my guess is that we'll cap at around 11 billion. That would be my guess. I think at some point our world population will peak at around 10.5, 11 billion. I'm not too concerned about that. I'm more concerned about I'm not concerned about production or productivity. I think we can produce, and frankly, I'm a believer in genetic engineering. I actually think that GMOs do have a role to play, an important role to play. It makes agriculture more efficient, but it's really boils down to distribution and frankly waste. You and I, consumers, waste about 48% of all the food that we buy. So every day, Gord, I get calls from reporters and say, "My goodness, food prices are skyrocketing. What can consumers do?" And I say to them, "It's simple. Eat what you buy."
I saw you saying that in a CTV news. I think it was CTV. It might have been someone else, and you said, well, you were asked the question, "What can consumers do?" And you rhymed off, comparison shop, clip the coupons, but then you finish it off by saying, "But ultimately, huge waste is such a huge issue. If you buy something, eat it."
That's right. And just that can solve a lot of problem. And of course, our Western world luxury got us to be picky and not eat the same thing twice in a row and all that. But frankly, I think like I'm usually for lunch, I go in the fridge, I look at leftovers. I pick whatever's there, I eat it. That's what my kids, they're not there yet. But and my wife and I, we do that all the time. It's important, and we do it not just to save the planet, but to selfishly is to save money too. I mean,
Sure.
we're not a bank here, so we're very careful with our money, and but food is often taken for granted. If there's one silver lining out of all of this, is that I actually think that we're slowly watching a society that is valuing food more, not less. And when you have a society that values food more, people will be careful. That we'll go back to the basics. It's not about because food for a very long time, for about 30 years, I'd say that food became this thing about food orgies and gastronomy and cuisines and discovery and traveling, and which is great, it's fine, it was about entertainment, but we forgot about the basics. We forgot about where food is coming from, the energy that is put into producing food, the energy that is put into processed food, where I mean, look at baby formula right now. I mean,
Yes.
everyone's wondering what is going on here. Like, are we just one recall away from a disaster all the time? And so, but people don't know that they can actually do their own formula at home. They forgot that they have other options as well. If you're very careful and you get the proper information, you can do a lot of different things, but people forgot about that. And so the more you value food, I think you get two things. You get a more knowledgeable economy and you get better policy too in return.
Well, in today's world, if you go onto Facebook now, you will see people posting up uh, guidance on how to make your own baby formula
Mm.
and the ingredients to use. But that will come with a fact check from Reuters, Snopes, or whatever organization saying that you should not make your own baby formula at home. So,
Because it's dangerous. That's like and frankly, I'm in the media all the time. It's not my area of expertise. I'm not a medical doctor or a pediatrician or a family doctor, but I certainly would encourage. I always encourage people to consult. If you are substituting something with something else that you don't know anything about, just consult, of course, because we're talking about babies. In the
yes.
United States, as Mark knows, they're dealing with two deaths. Two infants died recently and they don't even know why. They think there's a link to baby formula, but they're not sure. That's serious stuff. In China in 2008, they 6 toddlers died, and over 300,000 infants were hospitalized. That is serious stuff. If you're not careful, a lot of things can happen.
Right. Did you want to throw in anything, Mark?
Yeah, I was wondering, why do you think, at least in the States, especially here, the health food stores are switching over to GMO from organics? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think cost effectiveness, or why is it the reason?
I think the organic market is has peaked, and frankly, because of food inflation, people are much more frugal. It's all about discounting, 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 and it's not that often that you see organic products being discounted. And organic farming is less efficient. So there was a study a few years ago. I did mention that we produce enough food to feed 10 billion people right now. But if you were to go organic, like everywhere, if all food would be produced organically, you would probably end up being able to feed about 4 billion people, not 10. Because there's lots of waste and there's it's less efficient, and you do lose a lot when you run crops like that. So that I think a lot of people, I think still a lot of people are drawn to organics for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they think it tastes better. Sometimes it's better they think it's better for their health. It doesn't matter what the reason is. But at the end of the day, I actually think that this Franken food era has come to an end. The one thing that is still challenged right now is the use of pesticides, and in particular glyphosate. I mean, as you know, Mark, there are a lot of lawsuits in the United States right now related to the use of glyphosate, and that's something I think the biotech industry is doing a lousy job communicating risks to the public, because they say. I remember interviewing the CEO. So I wanted to a couple of years ago, before Monsanto was bought by BASF. I wanted to understand why Monsanto became the most hated company in the world. And so my friend, who's a plant scientist, and I went to St. Louis and spent a week at Monsanto. And on that Friday, we were meeting with the CEO. His name was Hugh Grant at the time, and I'm always going to remember this moment. I actually asked him, "So you are the CEO of probably the most hated company in the world. You Google Monsanto, you saw skulls.
Oh yeah.
It was just terrible. I mean, the PR was terrible." And so I said, "So why did you let things go? Why didn't you connect with the public as soon as possible?" And his response was this: "The science was on our side. Why bother?" Okay?
Yeah.
Which means why explain? I mean, we're fine, we're good, but science is not just about facts. It's about perceptions too. And that's what they missed, and they're still missing it to a certain extent. Even regulators like the FDA or even the CDC, or what we saw during COVID, uh, Canada with Health Canada and PIAC, you saw really risk communication is not an art that is well understood when it comes to public health. And often we pay for that. And frankly, genetic engineering has a lot to offer to the world, but the industry's paying for a lousy risk communication strategy.
I want to go back to just one thing because I know you're constrained for time. But you had mentioned something to the effect that Canada now has 1 point something percent less arable land, less productive land than we used to.
Yeah.
And it's the issue of soil degradation. How big of a problem is soil degradation around the world?
It's huge. It's huge. We don't take care of our soil. In fact, I think the FAO dedicated, I think it was 2019, the International Year of Soil. And at the time, I thought it was a good idea, but that year nobody talked about soil science at all. I mean, it wasn't really a big topic. Whereas a few years before, it was about lentils and pulses, and a lot of people started to talk about plant-based products and proteins. And I think this is a big one, and that's why I spoke earlier about fertilizers. The best
Yeah.
food for soil is our fertilizers. And yeah, we need to make sure that we feed our soils properly in order to get more productivity. There's no other way to do it, and that's why, yeah, there's not a whole lot of attention dedicated to soil science, in my view, and the health of our soils in general. Like Ukraine. A lot of people don't know this, but 25% of all black soil in the world, which is the richest soil you can find, is actually located in that area.
Wow. I
So
wasn't
they
aware.
don't need a whole lot of fertilizers. They grow anything. They grow lots of things very efficiently. It's incredible. And the war just absolutely hampered their ability to grow anything for a while, which is really unfortunate. But we've been talking about crises, and the one thing I would say um, before we leave is that I do have hope that at some point uh, the some countries actually can play a pretty significant role, and I'm thinking about China in particular. China can actually change everything. Nobody really sees it, but I am looking at China right now to see what the hell is it going to do? Because they have reserves, they have money, they have influence, they have people. They are connected with Russia to a certain extent. Russia has reserves. I mean, they can actually change things quite rapidly. So I was talking about deficits earlier during our talk, but China can change things. So I'm hoping at some point that perhaps they could come in and just make sure that we don't really face that global food security crisis we're expecting.
Well, I'll end it off, if I may, here you and something again that you tweeted just recently, and it's the Canadian dairy industry has faced challenges in terms of getting their product out to international markets. And lo and behold, a Chinese company comes in, makes an investment, and now they're exporting back to China. Can you just shed some light on that?
This is so Mark, you're about to hear what bad policy looks like.
Okay.
So in Canada, we have supply management. Okay, so we produce what we need for milk. That's how it goes. So farmers have quotas, and they're charged with the task of producing the milk we need to make the yogurt, the cheese, everything dairy in Canada every year. That's how it works. Um, but I've actually advocated for change. I actually do think that the world would want more dairy from Canada, including the United States, and of course China with the melamine scandal back in 2008. Thought, well, there's an opportunity there, but it was always been argued. It was always argued to me by the dairy industry. Well, Sylvain, shipping milk across the world is not possible. It's not something we can do. Or we can't do it efficiently. But here we are in 2022, and there's a plant, a $225 million plant, which was built by a Chinese company. And that company is buying cow milk and goat milk from Canadian producers, processes it in Kingston, and ships all that product in baby formula, the stuff we're missing right now, to China. To China. Now, the plan itself was subsidized by the Canadian government. It was subsidized by the Ontario government. And of course, with supply management, the milk sold to the plant is partially subsidized by Canadians. And all that is to feed China.
Instead of
And
Canadian.
right now in the US, there are shortages of baby formula, and in Canada as well.
Sounds
Now,
like,
that, my friends, is bad policy.
well, it sounds to me like, I'm not going to ask you to make any political endorsements, but it sounds like at least in one narrow area, you have an affinity with Maxime Bernier because he's been a bit of a thorn in the side of the dairy industry.
Oh, I've actually had chats with Maxime Bernier twice actually about supply management, and I don't agree with him actually. So his position is to abolish the whole system.
Right, like the wheat marketing board.
That is not my position. Actually,
Okay.
I think that if we get rid of quotas tomorrow, we would actually we would see our entire dairy sector disappear because our farms are inefficient right now. And Gord, I actually think that we need some domestic production in Canada. It is milk. Over time, if you get rid of quotas, we would all drink American milk. We would all eat and it's great to get more variety from America, from Europe, but I think you need some domestic production. So quotas are necessary, but I've actually advocated for change, which is in our document called Supply Management 2.0, which I presented to the dairy farmers. But of course, they say, of course, these guys are millionaires. They have so much money, so much money. Why would they care to change? That's the problem. And so you got a Chinese company coming in, proving them wrong. They're selling their milk, subsidized milk to them. They don't care where it goes. They don't care if it goes to China. They're getting the money, and that's the problem.
All right, Mark, you got anything you want to end off with?
No, we really appreciate you coming on.
It was a thrill.
Yeah, it was
Good
great.
to see you again. This is the first time I've spoken to Sylvain in 25 plus years.
Yeah, I
Sylvain,
think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Sylvain, thank
Absolutely.
you very much for coming on. And if you want to
Stay tuned for more podcasts. Subscribe, share the podcast out. We got a great one tomorrow with actor Richard Leacock, who's been on the show Doc. He's been Stargate SG-1, 21 Jump Street, you name it. He's been on a lot of shows. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.